The early morning light cast long shadows across the desert runway as Captain Aisha Malik prepared for takeoff. The air was still cool, the kind of calm that often precedes the chaos of flight. She tightened her helmet strap, checked her instruments one last time, and gave a nod to the ground crew. The jet's engine hummed to life beneath her, a deep, powerful sound that filled her with a familiar rush of adrenaline. Aisha was no stranger to the skies. Years of training, countless hours in the cockpit, and an unbreakable will had made her one of the finest fighter pilots in her squadron. Today was supposed to be a routine training mission, no surprises, no risks beyond the usual drills. But fate had other plans. As the jet lifted from the runway, the world below fell away, replaced by endless blue and the shimmering heat of the desert far beneath. The plane responded to her every command with grace and power, a seamless extension of her own body. She pushed the throttle forward, ascending higher, feeling the wind rush past at incredible speed, but then, a sudden, violent shudder ripped through the aircraft. The steady roar of the engines was interrupted by a sharp grinding noise, followed by warning lights flashing urgently on her control panel. Her left engine sputtered, coughed, and finally fell silent, sending the jet into a dangerous wobble. Time seemed to slow. Aisha's training kicked in instantly, overriding any flicker of panic. Her fingers flew across the controls, trying to steady the failing machine. The radio burst to life with frantic voices, but the crackling static made it nearly impossible to understand. She was alone, isolated, a speck of human courage suspended. In a vast, indifferent sky, the desert below stretched endlessly, an unforgiving expanse of sand and rock. A crash here would mean certain death. The weight of that truth pressed heavily on her chest, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. Fear was there, lurking just beneath the surface, but it was matched by something stronger. Determination. Aisha took a deep breath, clearing her mind. She focused on the emergency protocols drilled into her since her first day at the academy. Every move mattered. Every second could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting the throttle on the working engine, compensating for the failing wing. The jet groaned in protest but held steady. She kept her eyes on the horizon, her mind calculating every possibility. The radio came alive again, clearer this time. Mayday, mayday. This is Falcon 2-1. Engine failure. Requesting immediate assistance. Her voice was steady, unwavering, even as the plane trembled beneath her. Ground control responded with calm urgency, guiding her towards a nearby airstrip. The distance was perilous, but she had no choice. Turning back was impossible. Her left engine was dead weight. Each second was a battle. The jet fought against gravity and damage, but Aisha fought harder, her will as unyielding as the desert sun beating down below. Memories flashed through her mind, her family's proud smiles when she first earned her wings, the sacrifices made to reach this point, the faces of her fellow pilots who trusted her implicitly. She couldn't let them down. With every fiber of her being, she coaxed the jet forward, inching closer to safety. The landing approach was terrifying. The jet was sluggish, unbalanced, and vulnerable. Aisha's heart pounded as she aligned with the runway, muscles tense, eyes locked on the strip ahead. She touched down with a jarring thud, tires screeching against the asphalt as the damaged plane fought for control. Smoke billowed from the left wing, but the jet stayed on course. When the engines finally cut, silence enveloped her. For a heartbeat, she simply sat, breathing heavily, her hands trembling but steady on the controls. Then a flood of relief washed over her. She had made it. Emerging from the cockpit, Aisha was met with cheers and embraces, but she barely heard them. The battle was won, but her story was just beginning. She knew this day would be remembered, not for the failure of her plane, but for the courage that refused to let death win. The runway was quiet now, save for the distant murmurs of the recovery team rushing to assess the damage to Aisha's jet. Her boots hit the hot tarmac, and she felt every inch of exhaustion ripple through her body. But inside, a storm was raging, a mix of relief, frustration, and an unyielding need to understand what had gone wrong. As she watched the mechanics circle her plane, poking and prodding at the shattered left wing and broken engine, Aisha's mind replayed every second of the flight. The jolt, the alarms, the battle to keep control, it all felt surreal. How had a routine mission turned into a life-or-death struggle so fast? The squadron commander approached, his face grave but respectful. "You handled it well, Captain Malik. Most wouldn't have lasted as long as you did up there." Aisha nodded but said nothing. Praise felt hollow in the shadow of what could have been a tragedy. Later, in the quiet of the debrief room, the weight of the event settled on her shoulders. The officers and engineers presented their preliminary findings: a rare mechanical failure in the jet's left engine system. A fault that should have been caught during routine checks. Her heart sank. Aisha knew that every pilot trusted their machine implicitly. That trust had been shattered in an instant, replaced by raw vulnerability. Yet, beneath the disappointment, another feeling took hold, a fierce determination not to be defined by this failure. the next days were a whirlwind of tests, inspections, and interviews. Aisha underwent rigorous medical checks, her body bruised but intact. Her spirit, though battered, remained unbroken. Friends and fellow pilots reached out with messages of support, each word a reminder that she was not alone. But Aisha's battle was internal. She wrestled with self-doubt, asking herself if she had missed a sign, if she could have done more to prevent the crisis, but deep down, she knew the truth: some things are beyond control. Her focus shifted toward recovery, both her own and the jet's. She immersed herself in studying the technical reports, wanting to learn everything about the failure that almost ended her flight. She met with engineers, asked questions, and reviewed emergency procedures over and over. Her resolve was clear: if she was going to return to the skies, she would be stronger, smarter, more prepared than ever. In the quiet moments, when the world seemed still, Aisha allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened. The fear, the adrenaline, the overwhelming sense of isolation at 30,000 feet with a broken plane, but she never let despair take root. Her family stood by her side, their pride evident even when words were few. Her mother's steady hands and her father's quiet strength were anchors in the turbulent sea of emotions. At night, when sleep came fitfully, Aisha would stare at the ceiling, visualizing the cockpit, the instruments, the way she had fought to keep control. Her mind was a battleground, but her heart was a fortress. Weeks passed. The repairs to the jet were completed, the mechanics having done their best to restore the once proud fighter to flight readiness. But the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Aisha knew that returning to the skies meant confronting those scars head-on. When the day came for her first flight after the incident, her squadron gathered to watch. Cameras captured the moment. Knowing that her story was already inspiring others, she climbed into the cockpit, heart pounding but eyes clear. As the engines roared to life, she felt a surge of power, not just from the machine beneath her but from the courage that had carried her through the darkest hour. The runway rushed beneath her as she lifted off, soaring into the open sky once more. For Captain Aisha Malik, this was more than a return. It was a declaration: courage is forged in the fire of adversity, and legends are born from those who refuse to give up. The cockpit hummed with familiar sounds, the steady rhythm of instruments, the gentle vibration beneath her fingers, the steady breath of the machine she had come to trust again. Captain Aisha Malik sat upright, her eyes scanning the horizon, every nerve alert but calm. This wasn't just another flight. It was her proving ground, her testament to resilience. The mission was straightforward, a routine reconnaissance sweep over the desert zone. But for Aisha, every second held weight. Her hands gripped the controls with a renewed precision, her mind sharpened by the hard lessons from the last flight. Every warning light, every shift in altitude, every gust of wind was met with the vigilance of a seasoned pilot who had faced death and refused to surrender. As she navigated the clear blue sky, her thoughts briefly drifted to her team waiting back at base. The squadron had been her family, a source of strength through the toughest times. Their faith in her had never wavered, even when she questioned herself most deeply. Midway through the sweep, the radio crackled, a reminder of connection and support. "Malik, all clear on your route. Keep sharp." The voice brought a subtle smile to her lips. She wasn't alone, but even as she felt the comfort of that communication, the skies remained unpredictable. Suddenly, distant smoke plumes appeared on the horizon, signs of a skirmish breaking out below. Civilians and allied forces were caught in an unexpected firefight. The calm of her reconnaissance turned into urgency. Aisha's pilot instincts kicked in immediately. She adjusted her flight path, descending to get a better view. The landscape below was scarred by explosions and flickering fires. She could see the small convoy desperately trying to maneuver through the chaos. The radio grew tense with urgent calls for air support. Her heart pounded. The moment she had prepared for, to use her skill and courage in the face of danger, had arrived, but the memory of her last harrowing flight lingered in the back of her mind. Could she face this new threat without hesitation? Could she trust her plane fully? Taking a deep breath, Aisha pushed past the lingering doubts. She reminded herself of the resilience that had brought her back. She was no longer the pilot who had fought to survive. She was a warrior ready to protect. She radioed command, requesting clearance for immediate support. "Civilians in distress. I'm moving in." The response was swift. "Clearance granted. Proceed with caution." With that, she dove toward the conflict zone, the F-15 responding to her every command. The wind roared past the cockpit, the sun glinting off the jet's sleek body. Her eyes narrowed, scanning for targets, hostile forces threatening the vulnerable. The moments stretched taut as she engaged in maneuvers that required absolute focus. Missiles locked onto enemy vehicles, precision strikes cleared the path for ground forces. Her flying was a dance between danger and control, but in the midst of the chaos, a sudden jolt shook the aircraft, a painful reminder that even this mission held risks. Her jet had taken a hit from anti-aircraft fire, sensors flashing warnings. The left engine shuddered again. Aisha's grip tightened, heart racing. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time tempered by calm. She had faced the impossible before, and this was no different. Her mind raced through emergency protocols. Quick decisions had to be made. She sent a terse radio update. Engine hit again. Damage is significant. Initiating emergency procedures. Her hands moved with practiced speed, stabilizing the jet, adjusting thrust, preparing for what might come below. Allied forces cheered as the enemy faltered, thanks in no small part to her support, but Aisha's battle was not over. With every ounce of strength and skill, she fought to keep the plane steady. The jet systems strained, but she refused to give in to fear. As the minutes crawled by, she charted a course for home, calculating every risk, every possibility. Her mind flashed back to the recovery team. She knew they were ready, waiting, hoping for her safe return, but the sky was still fraught with danger. Enemy fire continued to follow, relentless and unforgiving. In those high-stakes moments, Aisha's resolve crystallized. She was not just flying a machine. She was carrying the hopes of everyone who believed in her. She whispered a silent vow, "I will make it back. I will not fail." The battered F-15 groaned under the strain of battle damage. Every warning light that blinked on the control panel was a reminder that her aircraft was no longer the flawless machine she had trusted. Yet, Captain Aisha Malik refused to let fear dictate her actions. She was a pilot forged in the fires of combat and loss, and she would not let her story end in the sky. Her left engine sputtered violently, threatening to fail at any moment. The plane shuddered as she fought to maintain control. Sweat dripped down her brow, but her eyes remained steely and focused, scanning the instruments and the horizon beyond. The radio was silent except for faint static, the enemy jamming their communications. Without the full use of her radio, Aisha knew she was isolated, alone in the vast desert skies, with no immediate backup. Her mind raced. The mission had changed from reconnaissance and support to sheer survival. But quitting was not an option. She recalled her training: how to fly a crippled jet, how to assess damage quickly, how to prepare for emergency landings. Every second counted. The enemy's ground fire grew closer, a barrage of missiles and tracer rounds lighting up the sky behind her. Each explosion rattled the plane's frame, shaking her to the core. Her F-15, once a symbol of power and speed, now felt like a wounded beast struggling to stay airborne. Come on," she whispered to herself, fingers tightening on the controls. Her thoughts flicked to the squadron back at base, their faces, their cheers, their unwavering faith. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for them. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, she pushed the plane into a steep climb, evading the incoming missiles. The G-forces pressed her back into the seat, but she held firm. She glanced at the fuel gauge, dangerously low. There was no room for error. Suddenly, a harsh warning beeped sharply: hydraulics failure on the right wing. Panic flickered briefly, but Aisha shoved it aside. Her mind was a razor edge of focus. She adjusted the flaps manually, compensating for the failing systems. The cockpit filled with acrid smoke. She activated the oxygen mask, fighting to keep calm despite the choking air. The radio crackled weakly. A brief voice cut through the static. "Malik. Status?" Her fingers trembled as she keyed the mic. "Engine failure critical. Damage severe. Requesting immediate evac support." "Copy that," came the reply. "Hold tight. Rescue teams en route." Hope surged through her, a lifeline amid the storm, but the sky was unforgiving. Another explosion rocked the jet, sending shards of metal and fuel leaks into the cockpit. Aisha's vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, willing herself to stay alert. With every ounce of strength, she guided the plane away from enemy lines. Steering toward a small clearing she'd spotted earlier, the terrain below was rough, but it was her only chance. As she prepared for an emergency landing, her mind raced through every possible outcome. The landing gear was damaged. She'd have to perform a belly landing. Her heart thundered in her chest. With painstaking care, she descended, the ground rushing up fast. She braced herself, hands steady on the controls. The F-15 hit the earth hard, skidding across rocks and sand, sparks flying from the damaged undercarriage. The impact jolted through her body, but Aisha remained conscious. She fought to slow the plane's momentum, finally bringing it to a halt. In a cloud of dust, silence enveloped her. The engines died. She exhaled, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over her. She reached for the radio, hoping for more contact. Static. No response. For a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. Then, a crackling voice burst through the static: "We're tracking your location. Rescue is on the way. Hang tight." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming surge of survival and hope. She had made it. Her plane was broken, but she was not. As she climbed out of the cockpit, the desert sun blazed overhead. Her uniform was torn, her body Bruised, but her spirit burned fiercely. She looked up at the endless blue sky, a silent promise in her gaze. She would return. Stronger. Unbroken. The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly as Captain Aisha Malik sat beside the wreckage of her F-15. The plane was a crumpled, smoking shell, yet it had been her lifeline, her home in the skies. Now it was a silent reminder of how close she had come to death. The minutes felt like hours as she scanned the barren landscape. The vast expanse stretched endlessly, golden sands shimmering with heat waves. There was no shade, no shelter, just the emptiness of the desert and the searing sun. Aisha's body ached. The impact had bruised her ribs, and cuts on her hands stung with every movement. Yet, she refused to give in to pain or despair. She was trained for this. She was strong. She was a fighter. Her radio was useless, dead after the crash. The last faint voice promising rescue had kept her hope alive, but the weight was unbearable. As she settled down, she checked her survival kit, minimal supplies, just enough for a short wait. Water was limited, and the sun was already draining her energy. She wrapped her scarf around her head to shield from the blazing sun. Her thoughts wandered to the mission and everything that had led to this moment: the scramble, the enemy fire, the roar of engines, the searing heat of the cockpit. The weight of responsibility pressed on her. She was more than a pilot, she was a protector of her country and her comrades. Failure was not an option, but the loneliness was crushing. No radio, no backup, no company. Just the vast desert and the silent wreckage. Memories surfaced: her family, her training, the promise she made to herself when she first took the skies. She remembered the words of her mentor, a grizzled veteran pilot who once told her, in the darkest moments, courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it. Her breath came heavy, but her eyes remained sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of rescue. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the distance. Her heart jumped. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun, trying to see more clearly. A small dust cloud approached, a convoy of military vehicles, kicking up sand as they sped towards her. Relief flooded through her, nearly bringing tears to her eyes. Soldiers surrounded her quickly, offering water, medical aid, and radios. "Captain Malik, we've got you," one of them said, steady and reassuring. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The journey back to base was slow and rough, every bump reminding her of the battle she'd just survived. As they approached the military hospital, Aisha's mind was already shifting gears, analyzing what went wrong, what could be improved, and how she could come back stronger. At the hospital, doctors examined her injuries carefully. Broken ribs, bruises, minor burns, painful but survivable. She was lucky, yet the emotional scars were deeper. That night, lying in the sterile hospital bed, she stared at the ceiling, wrestling with questions that haunted her. Could she have done more? Should she have acted differently? Was she truly ready for the dangers that came with flying solo in hostile skies? The answer was clear in her heart: yes, she was ready, and she had survived. Her courage was not just about flying planes. It was about facing the unknown with unwavering resolve. Her story was far from over. In the days that followed, her tale spread throughout the base: the pilot who refused to give up despite a broken plane and no communication, who fought through pain and fear to return alive. She became a symbol of resilience and hope. But for Aisha, the real battle was internal, between fear and faith, doubt and determination. She spent hours in counseling, sharing her experience with fellow pilots, and helping new recruits prepare for the harsh realities of combat. Her spirit inspired many, but she remained humble. "I'm not a hero," she told a visiting reporter. "I just did what anyone would do: fight for survival and keep hope alive." The military brass recognized her bravery with a commendation, but the true reward was the respect and admiration of her peers. More importantly, she had proven to herself that even when everything breaks, courage can rebuild what's lost. The days turned into weeks, but Captain Aisha Malik's resolve never wavered. The hospital's sterile walls could not contain the storm of emotions inside her: pain, frustration, but above all, an unyielding fire to fly again. Her recovery was steady but slow. The broken ribs healed, and bruises faded, but the mental scars from that fateful day were deeper and harder to mend. She spent countless hours reflecting, meditating, and speaking with her therapists. The silence of that crash, the deafening quiet when her radio went dead, haunted her dreams. Yet, each day she told herself the same truth: courage is born not from avoiding fear, but from confronting it head-on. The military command watched her closely, knowing her experience was invaluable. They offered her a desk job, far from the dangers of flight, safer but not the life she wanted. Aisha declined. She wasn't meant to stay grounded, she wanted to fly. The base's flight instructors prepared a customized rehabilitation program. Every day, Aisha pushed her body, rebuilding strength and endurance. Her mind sharpened with tactical drills and simulator sessions, reliving the incident again and again, learning every lesson. The question wasn't just whether she could fly again, but whether she could face the skies without fear. When the day came for her first test flight after recovery, tension gripped the entire squadron. This was more than a check in the cockpit, it was a test of spirit. Aisha's hands gripped the controls with a mixture of nerves and determination. The familiar hum of the F-15's engines soothed her, the cockpit a place of control amid chaos. She took off, climbing through the clouds, the desert sprawling beneath her like a golden ocean. At 20,000 feet, the memories rushed back, the hit, the crackling silence of her radio, the desperate fight to control her plane. But this time, she was different. Stronger. Smarter. More fearless. She pushed the aircraft to its limits, navigating simulated threats, flawless in execution. When she finally landed, applause greeted her from the ground crew and fellow pilots. She had passed, but more importantly, she had conquered the battle within. In the weeks that followed, Captain Malik returned to active duty. Her presence in the squadron became legendary, not just for her skill, but for her story of survival and courage. She mentored younger pilots, sharing her experiences with raw honesty, teaching them not only how to fly but how to face failure and fear with grit. Her name spread beyond the base, inspiring articles, interviews, and even a documentary. Yet, Aisha remained humble, always crediting her team, her training, and her faith in herself. One evening, after a long day of drills, she sat quietly watching the desert sunset. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and purple, the same skies she had fought to master. Her heart swelled with pride and gratitude. She thought about the journey, from the moment her plane broke, the harrowing crash, the lonely wait, to this triumphant return. It was more than a story of survival. It was a testament to the power of human spirit. Her courage wasn't just legendary because of what she survived, but because of how she chose to rise afterward.